Welcome you guys on a Monday. It's a Monday. It's a Monday here at the Watch Party. Glad you guys are here for this party on the best damn day of the week. In case you forgot, or in case you're the first time here, maybe the second or third time you're here and you haven't been here on a Monday yet, understand it's the best damn day of the week. You should probably take yourself into the week feeling that way because you got what? At least if it's a normal work week, 5 whole days of excellence to take care of. Maybe doing things for yourself, maybe being amazing, things like that. That's why the best damn day of the week starts today. And it's also why I'm usually stressed the hell out on a Monday because I feel like I have to live up to that promise and those declarations I make every week. But you know what? Sometimes a little bit of pressure causes you to do better things. Just saying, it's not like I'm some kind of military kid or something, or my father told me things like that, because I'm not. I feel that way sometimes. Glad you guys are all here. As people fold in, I have to start early. I wanted to start 5 minutes before this because there's so many things happening. If you couldn't tell by how fast I'm talking, like I didn't think I was going to, I got too many things happening. I keep figuring more things to go to. I feel like I need to flesh out more things. But really fast, I want to say hi to Squirrel Dragon. Glad you reached out. I told you guys you can find me over on Instagram. I tend to try to respond as much as possible to folks. Squirrel Dragon did reach out. Glad you did. Glad I now know who you really are, as many of the other folks have as well. Toss me some story ideas. Tell me where I'm wrong, because I found out I was wrong on the small thing last week. I'm not going to bring it up. No, I actually will. There was a post from Donald Trump, apparently, that wasn't a post from Donald Trump. I had to cut that out because I moved a little too quick on that. Didn't vet that one. But doesn't change the energy that he also pulls off. It was another example of his authoritarian energy. And the reasons why it seems so normal and real is because he says things like what I quoted last week. But see, things like that, I can tell you that was wrong. But still. Find me over there. Say hey. And all you early nerds, since I only got like 7 minutes before the top of the hour, I got to squeeze all this stuff in. I might as well go ahead and get started. I'm going on TDR right after this, in case you guys didn't already know that. And John Iderola, he's like crazy stickler for time. There was a time I was late and he was like freaking out and stuff. What's the matter with these guys? So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I got a lot of stuff happening. So let folks know what we're doing. So let's get started here. I think we are prepared and ready to go. Yes. Let's do it. Did you guys hear about this? Donald Trump last week was doing that press conference where he's sitting there looking like a petulant child, surrounded by all of his minions who, for some reason, don't see him as a petulant child. And he was talking about the government shutdown, the lack of military pay. And boy, he came up with an answer. The only problem with his answer is that it was a stupid authoritarian answer.
They're going to go without their first full paychecks, federal workers.
By the way, a friend of mine, talking about donors, a friend of mine, a man that's great. I'm not going to use his name unless he lets me do it. Susie can tell you about this, but he called us the other day and he said, I'd like to contribute any shortfall you have because of the Democrat shutdown. I'd like to personally contribute any shortfall you have with the military, because I love the military and I love the country, and any shortfall, if there's a shortfall, I'll contribute it. And today he sent us a check for $130 million. I would love to tell you he doesn't really want the recognition, if you want to know the truth, but he gave us a check for $130 million, which was sort of a shortfall, yeah. And that's going to go to the military, yeah. Is that the correct number? $130 million. That's what I call a patriot.
Donald Trump announced $130 million with an M. $130 million given to him by a good friend of his, an anonymous good friend of his, to pay the military during this Democrat government shutdown. To pay the military. I want to say that number again. $130 million. If you believe that that's to pay the military, you would think that the military are a bunch of enslaved folks, wouldn't you? Because that's not enough money. Let me get to those details in a second. Here's the beginning of some details to this madness. From CNN, the donation was made on the condition that it be used to offset the cost of service members' salaries and benefits. That's what Sean Parnell said. And he said, adding that the money was accepted under the department's, quote, general gift acceptance authority. It's almost like they knew that accepting money from an anonymous person knows who the hell it is, one of Donald Trump's good friends, that he's not going to tell you who it is, could probably spark some issues with the fact that we have this thing called, rules in the Constitution. So again, that $130 million donation is unlikely to make any meaningful impact toward covering salaries of the roughly 1.3 million active duty military troops, which would result, in case you guys didn't know the math, about $100 per service member. Congratulations, there's that patriot giving each service member $100, to offset all of their salaries and benefits for the time of this Democrat government shutdown that Donald Trump keeps celebrating that he gets to have while he does things that make him seem like he's has absolute authority over the country to do anything that he likes. So that's the first bullshit. Here's more. Using anonymous donations to fund our military raises troubling questions of whether our own troops are at risk of literally being bought and paid for by foreign powers. That's what Senator Chris Coons said. Budget experts also questioned whether using the donation to pay military members runs afoul of the Anti-Deficiency Act, which forbids federal agencies from using federal funds that exceed what have been allocated to them. Democrats have accused the administration of violating that law multiple times during the shutdown, including in his decision to fire thousands of federal workers. He's like, yo, y'all haven't stopped me yet from breaking rules and destroying rules and ripping up the Constitution while we have this government shutdown that I keep complaining about, while at the same time doing things that I'm celebrating that I get to do, and then blame it on Democrats that nobody's buying, by the way. Here's the last slide from the details of this, authoritarian power grab. Or I'm sorry, who knows? Maybe a foreign person's paying $130 million to put in Donald Trump's pocket. In response to questions about the donor's identity and whether they have any ties to foreign entities or interests, a White House spokeswoman referred questions to the Pentagon and the Treasury. Okay, so start there. The White House punted to the Pentagon and the Treasury. Then the Pentagon referred those questions back to the White House. Then the Treasury did not immediately respond for any request for comment either. So when the questions are asked, the ball gets kicked around all over the place because they're all working in conjunction to not answer any questions anymore. Remember, that's why Pete Hegseth lectured and told every media organization that was talking within the Pentagon that they can no longer be there unless he tells them any information that he wants to tell them. Can't be walking the halls, can't talk to anybody, because they have a big cover-up going on in literally everything that they do. So it was kicked from the Pentagon, I guess, to the Treasury and the White House back to the Pentagon and the Treasury gave a couple big middle fingers and said, what do you think this was? America? So that's, like I said, the first BS line of this. But Harry Sisson, I saw him post this and I was thinking, what is this actually about? And this is him speculating, but maybe it's based off of some actual details in reality. Harry Sisson is the guy that Donald Trump, in his AI video where he's taking shits all over the United States of America, and for some reason that's acceptable in this country, to not see that as him saying, I hate you guys. Still, he's the one who posted this about what this could really be about.
So the mystery man behind the donation, his name is Timothy Mellon. He's a billionaire, a backer of Donald Trump, and he's the heir to the Mellon fortune. It's like this huge bank. And here he is. He's kind of like a low-profile billionaire. He doesn't do a lot of press, so you might not have heard of him before. But initially, Donald Trump would not reveal his identity. It was only discovered after someone in the administration spoke to the New York Times and other outlets. But here's where the story gets weird. His father, Paul Mellon, is listed in the Epstein flight logs. He's logged twice, so it appears he flew on the plane multiple times. You can see it's labeled J.E. for Jeffrey Epstein, then it's Paul Mellon, and then two females listed both times. And it gets even weirder because the Bank of New York Mellon, where he's obviously connected, was recently sued by a woman who was abused by Epstein, alleging that the banks knowingly provided financial services that enabled him to conduct his operation for years. So these are the people that Donald Trump is friends with. And maybe this donation was kind of like a thank you for not releasing the Epstein files.
I guess the last part is just a bit of an assumption that Harry gets to make. I mean, considering, as he was pointing out, this guy, the anonymous donor that Donald Trump said, I mean, I'm only going to say his name if he really wants me to, but there's a reason why he probably didn't want you to. But apparently reports let go. It went to the New York Times first. So don't believe Harry Sisson, since you think he's, this super lib who lies all the time about a president who lies all the time. So don't believe him. How about we believe some reality about what is that happened? He was talking about how his dad was on these flight logs next to some women's names, girls' names potentially. Who knows? We would know if they released all the information that they're covering up in this huge cover up of one of the biggest child sex trafficking rings in American history. If that was the case, we could know more. But until then, we just have to connect some dots. So let's get to connecting some dots. Don't believe Jeffrey Sisson. How about we believe what was going on from this reporting from the New York Times, which also hear from CNBC, who had more information based off of what is that we all know about that woman who sued these banks. A woman who says she was abused by the late financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein sued Bank of America and the Bank of New York Mellon on Wednesday, alleging that the banks knowingly provided financial services that enabled his sex trafficking operation for years. Here's a quote. We don't think the suit has any merit, and we're going to contest it vigorously. That's what Bank of New York CEO Robin Vance said on Thursday in this interview with Squawk on the Street. I mean, I assume people generally trust CNBC. Sometimes they're all about continuing to sanitize the madness that happens, but lately they've been trying to figure out, are people really going to keep believing this shit? Here's more. She's represented by law firms Boyce, Schiller, and Edwards Henderson, who previously secured settlements of $75 million and $290 million with Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan, respectively, over their alleged financial ties to Epstein as well. Neither Deutsche nor JP Morgan admitted wrongdoing in agreeing to settle. Whenever Donald Trump talks about his settlements he's got with ABC News and George Stephanopoulos and the other pressure he's put on colleges, universities, and other media outlets, and he says that's a clear slam dunk. They were abusing and doing things wrong to me unfairly. So, in going with that same mindset, these two banks that were sued for $75 million and $290 million for financial ties to Jeffrey Epstein, they settled. So if you believe you're a MAGA king, you should also believe that these two banks potentially are admitting to complete wrongdoing. I mean, that's according to the president of the United States. So these two law firms that are representing this woman have already come down with some settlement money. That might mean something. But this means, I think, even more. Of course, the woman who's suing is keeping her name anonymous because we're full of child sex trafficking folks in this country. So Jane Doe said she opened a Bank of America account in 2013 at the direction of Richard Kahn, who's Epstein's former accountant, and that Kahn regularly sent her money for rent through that account. Lawyers for Kahn did not immediately respond. Doe said in 2015, 2 years later, Kahn's assistant told her that Epstein was adding her to the payroll for a, quote, sham company and that she would receive funds through her Bank of America account. She said she did not know the purpose of those payments. So as she's being trafficked and abused consistently by these folks, she's also being paid and kept basically on retainer, having her rent paid. So she's kind of their, enslaved person. Last one on the details of this. The lawsuit against BNY said the bank gave a line of credit to MC2, a modeling agency that the lawsuit said Epstein and French model scout Jean-Luc Brunel used to traffic victims. So in total, BNY processed $378 million in payments to women trafficked by Epstein. $378 million going through this bank. Brunel was arrested in December of 2020 and was found dead in jail in 2022. That's according to Parisian prosecutors. Both lawsuits said the banks should have filed suspicious activity reports with the U.S. Treasury Department. The lawsuits said such reports could have helped law enforcement stop Epstein sooner. Isn't it weird how these guys that are associated with Epstein and child sex trafficking, when they're busted and go to jail, they end up dead? That guy ended up dead, and he was associated with that, that whole situation. Jeffrey Epstein ended up dead, and he was definitely associated with that whole situation. So now we've got this anonymous funder of $130 million to the military to pay for their salaries and their benefits. And Donald Trump is gleefully talking about how this guy is a patriot when his father apparently was on these Epstein flight logs. And we're left to wonder, according to Harry Sisson, is this like a thank you, $130 million? And is Donald Trump dumb enough to think that people will believe, oh man, $130 million the military is taken care of? Now all you got to do is come after these dirty, nasty Democrats who shut down the government to keep that $130 million. I'm sorry, that $100 per military's active service duty pocket to make sure it's filled with that crisp $100 bill. They're great now. Maybe they can pay for a couple of apples and bananas at the store. But since we're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and since we're talking about these potential ties that Donald Trump has with his rich and connected and powerful friends, I'm sorry, he said so, not me. He said a really good friend of mine who wants to remain anonymous gave me $130 million and broke some more rules to do so. Since we're talking about dead folks associated with Jeffrey Epstein, here's a story from Michael Wolff, that guy who's written multiple books and had multiple interviews with Jeffrey Epstein and has been exposing Donald Trump's connections and buddy-buddy relationships to Jeffrey Epstein for years now. Let's check in with Michael Wolff. He has a story about how this, you remember that there was discussions about the fallout between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, and people said it was about real estate. It was about he stole his employee, which I think was Virginia Giuffre. All those stories never really fully matched up, and we never knew. It was something about real estate. It's weird that they keep telling these stories because Michael Wolff tells them so much more clear, and they make so much more sense.
In 2004, Epstein believed himself to be the high bidder on a piece of real estate in Palm Beach, a house. $36 million was his bid. He took his friend Trump around to see the house to advise him on how to move the swimming pool. Trump thereupon went around Epstein's back and bid $40 million for the house and got the property. Epstein, who was well acquainted, in fact, deeply involved with Trump's scattered finances, understood that he didn't have $40 million to pay for this house. Now, if that was the case, it was someone else's $40 million. At the time, Epstein believed this to be the $40 million of a Russian oligarch by the name of Rybolovlev. Less than 2 years later, this same house that Trump had bought for $40 million was sold for $95 million. And it was, in fact, sold to Mr. Rybolovlev. This is all a red flag of money laundering.
That's part one. There's a lot more than Michael Wolff has said, but really fast. So there was a bit of a real estate dispute, and Donald Trump went behind Jeffrey's back, bought the property that he wanted, that he was very jazzed about, but didn't have $40 million. Went through some Russian guy, and then it seems to be to make $55 million. Just want to have a quick recap of how this whole falling out, again, according to Michael Wolff, who wrote many books and talked to Jeffrey Epstein intimately about his life, was sharing. Here's part two of that fallout.
What Epstein did, and he was furious about losing this house. I mean, there's something about these guys that nothing rouses them so much as a real estate betrayal. Epstein, after the sale of this house, after Trump went around his back, got this house, Epstein began to threaten him. He began to threaten him with lawsuits. He began to threaten him with going to the press and saying that Trump was a front man for a money laundering deal. Trump panics at this point. And Epstein believed, and he believed to his dying day, that it was Trump who went to the police, Trump who was fully acquainted with what was going on at Epstein's house, fully acquainted for many years. Trump went to the police and, as Epstein said, dropped the dime on him. That is to say, informed the police of what was going on, and an investigation began, and all of Epstein's legal problems for the next 15 years began to unfold.
I mean, Michael Wolff is very thorough in his explanations, even explaining what dropping the dime on someone means, meaning he exposed him, turned him into authorities, knowing what it was that he was up to. So a couple of criminals turned on each other. One threatened to turn the other one in, because that's what, criminals do once the heat starts coming on, or maybe they're mad about something unrelated, like a real estate deal, which of course is based in some level of illegality, because that's who Donald Trump is. So there's that second aspect of this falling out. Here's the last part. But apparently what Michael Wolff is claiming is that Donald Trump turned in his buddy Epstein for everything that he was about before he got turned in for something unrelated. And I guess he wasn't thinking too far into that, because now look at what we're talking about.
This story about this piece of real estate and their falling out was first published in June 2019. It's published actually in my book, Siege, the second book I had written about the Trump White House. Epstein had recounted this story to me. I put it in this book. Epstein at that moment was in Paris. He read the book. He called me with some alarm, and he said he was afraid that he might have said too much. 3 weeks later, he returned to the United States from Paris and was promptly arrested on the tarmac of Teterboro Airport in New Jersey when his plane landed.
And then all the rest fell apart for Jeffrey Epstein and his child sex trafficking ring. Again, this is according to Michael Wolff, who I believe has a lot of legitimacy and credibility on these topics, considering he's talked directly to Jeffrey Epstein. We've seen Jeffrey Epstein say some of the things that Michael Wolff was saying that he said about his friendship and relationship with Donald Trump, all that. So you don't have to believe him, but I'm just playing what is that he's saying. I just want to point out how disgusting, again, every time we talk about anything when it comes to this started with this whole deal with getting $130 million from Donald Trump's good friend, who's the heir to this billion dollar family of this bank, who's caught up with some issues with the Jeffrey Epstein survivor. Just want to point that out. So if you guys showed up late, this whole story will be up later, of course, on the watch list. Glad you guys got here. I had so much to talk about, and I'm going to be on TDR in like 45 minutes. So I started early. Apologies if you missed the beginning of that. But the good news is you don't have to keep missing the beginning of that. As long as you like this stream, more people will know it. If you subscribe to this channel, you'll know when that's happening again. But also, if you go back later and check out those clips that we put up afterwards, you'll see the full story unfolding. And I think it's pretty compelling. Before we jump into this next one, I want to welcome everyone that actually got here on time rather than early. Man, looks like you guys just never know what I'm going to do. And the fun part is neither do I. So let's go to this next story. I do know where I'm going with this, though. I was talking last week about many of the things that are starting to explode in the streets of America with ICE agents, the Gestapo that's ripping people away from their families and up off the streets. And as was said months ago, before they even unleashed Donald Trump's personal army onto the streets, what we already knew was they'd be coming for American citizens. And one, Stephen Miller, who's one of the big masterminds behind this hate campaign of people that he knows he wish he was more like, but he's has inferior genes, I guess. He was talking about J.B. Pritzker because J.B. Pritzker is saying things that Stephen Miller doesn't like.
J.B. Pritzker could be arrested. Let's talk about your willingness and under what federal authority do you arrest a sitting governor?
Well, the answer I'm about to give doesn't only apply to Governor Pritzker. It applies to any state official, any local official, anybody who's operating in an official capacity who conspires or engages in activity that unlawfully impedes federal law enforcement conducting their duties. So if you engage in a criminal conspiracy to obstruct the enforcement of federal immigration laws, or to unlawfully order your own police officers or your own officials to try to interfere with ICE officers or even to arrest ICE officers, you're engaged in criminal activity. Different kinds of crimes would apply. There's obstruction of justice. There is harboring illegal aliens. There is impeding the enforcement of our immigration laws. And then as you get up the scale of behavior, you obviously get into seditious conspiracy charges.
Stephen Miller and his thumb for a head is the person who's now afraid of these threats of someone actually doing something about these ICE agents and their complete unlawful activities. As why he mentioned even arresting ICE agents, because that's been put forward as something that needs to be done to keep these criminals, this gang, off the streets from harassing and terrorizing American citizens. So that's what Stephen Miller's upset about, because J.B. Pritzker, who he's targeting there with the seditious conspiracy charges, because he posts things like this. This is what Stephen Miller's crying about. Pritzker pointed out Greg Bovino, Kristi Noem, and DHS need to answer for their unchecked attacks on Chicago residents. ICE is an out-of-control danger to our peaceful communities. The images from the Sun-Times today speak for themselves. Hey, let's look at some of those images that J.B. Pritzker posted that has Stephen Miller all upset and looking for seditious conspiracy charges. Here's one of them. Oh, look, we're actually seeing that there's agents with billy clubs out and guns pointed in the face of someone in a defensive stance because, you know, they're walking around being a human. I'm going to show you one other. There's a few of these. There's another man in camouflage, like he's in a war zone that they've created in the streets of Chicago, lobbing tear gas canisters at people that are standing armed with, you know, cell phones, as that man is in the orange hoodie, you know, because they're being attacked. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to show you more pictures. J.B. Pritzker also posted this picture of a Chicago police officer running water over his eyes because there's a chemical agent that was deployed on him by Trump's personal fucking army. Lastly, here's more of this Gestapo jumping on, it looks like a teenager with armed again with a cell phone, because that's what they're afraid of, with guns out, hands on his throat, and kneeling on his chest. That amounts to seditious conspiracy, according to Stephen Miller, because Stephen Miller is a traitor. He's an enemy of the United States. He's a fucking terrorist.
Well, we need to reassure a couple points to all ICE officers. You have federal immunity in the conduct of your duties. And anybody who lays a hand on you or tries to stop you or tries to obstruct you is committing a felony. You have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties. And the Department of Justice has made clear that if officials cross that line into obstruction, into criminal conspiracy against the United States or against ICE officers, then they will face justice.
He wants to make sure of one very specific thing. To my Gestapo, to my personal army, you can do anything you want. I want to reassure you, in case you're getting a little worried about governors of states and maybe mayors of cities doing something actionably to stop your illegal activities, I'm here to tell you the federal government is also conducting illegal activities, and we endorse your illegal activities. And matter of fact, you cracked more skulls. We congratulate you further. That's what Stephen Miller wanted to convey there, as he threatens governors, but then also tells his agents that they get to keep doing anything they want. One of the leaders of these agents, I believe he's a border patrol guy, Greg Bovino. Maybe you guys have seen him. We're going to get to what he looks like if you haven't yet. But here, first, Representative Mary Gay Scanlon. She's talking about what is that he's been up to. You won't be surprised to hear about if you know who Greg Bovino is.
You heard an awful lot about the fact that despite what the ICE agents and CBP are claiming out there, when they have to go to court, when they actually have to produce facts, they're unable to do so. So we have courts being increasingly skeptical of the lies that are coming from this administration about whether or not there's rebellion in the streets and whether or not the people they are detaining are dangerous or had resisted. While we were there, Bovino, the Customs and Border Patrol officer who's been in charge of some of the most outrageous raids in Los Angeles and now in Chicago, he was filmed lobbing tear gas canisters into a crowd. And there were allegations, and I think there's a recording of him saying to someone who was recording what was going on, "What, are you threatening me?" So deliberately trying to provoke a confrontation. You heard an awful.
And that is part of the game. They're trying to incite more violence. That's why they're lobbing tear gas canisters. That's why they're attacking citizens. That's why they're pulling out guns. So it looks like they're at some kind of danger. It's why Kristi Noem goes in front of cameras and says, our ICE agents are being attacked every day. And that's why they cover up their faces as they do illegal activities. That's why they're doing all this, because they finally want Americans to fight back so they can say, well, we have to initiate the Insurrection Act and fully take over this militarized state over the entire country. That was also a question that was asked to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and he didn't deny their full plans to eventually try and take over this entire country. These are all the beginnings of it. But again, you know, MAGA never listens to anyone else except for Donald Trump, even though they deny that they're in this cult. So they're not going to listen to that representative because, you know, she's a dirty Democrat and they've never heard of her anyway. But, you know, maybe if we just take a look at what is Greg Bovino and his gang of terrorists do in the streets, you don't have to listen to those dirty Democrats. You could just listen to the guy who's smiling and celebrating their attacks on American citizens and their threats to try and get them to fight back.
Doesn't matter to read. That's your first warning. It's private property.
We're gonna leave.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
That's your first warning.
Oh, look over there. It's Bovino. It's Bovino.
Yo, I know the man. Yeah, you're pretty famous. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, don't tell anybody.
What's with all the aggression? What's with all the aggression?
Oh, we're happy here. Why are your officers asking me where I'm from? We're happy. I thought you guys were doing targeted arrest. I thought you guys were.
So you can allow our people to go to it, right? I mean, that's part of the problem. No, it's misinterpretation.
Yo, I got a question. What's this?
That's what it is. Right? You gotta make a threat, man. What'd you say? Did you make a threat?
What did I say? What did I say? I didn't say shit. You heard
I
me?
think we could go back on that phone and heard it.
Don't worry about my phone.
You guys are leaving. Yo. What are you doing? Why are you guys grabbing her?
What are you doing, man?
Why are you guys grabbing her?
She didn't do anything. What are you doing, man?
And that's the name of the game for Greg Bovino and his gang. Terrorizing people in the streets. Did you threaten? Is that a threat? Is that a threat? Is that a cell phone? Because the cell phone is a threat to me because I'm a little bitch. I'm here to attack you. I'm here to start shit. Do you see them starting things with people? And then they're going to say, oh, that woman with the blue sweatshirt on was attacking us. She said something like, what are you doing here? Like I said, Greg Bovino is doing his job. His job, set forward by the President of the United States, is to terrorize American citizens, get them to fight back. And he's given himself and his agents all kinds of freedom to do just that based off of this. Do you guys remember he
You
said
look
this?
panicked when you see a Border Patrol agent. Perhaps you look scared. Perhaps your demeanor changes. Perhaps you're gripping the steering wheel so tightly that I can see the whites of your knuckles. There's a myriad of factors that we would look at to develop articulable facts for reasonable suspicion. You look panicked.
If you looked panicked when we pull our guns out on you, if you look a little scared, if the knuckles on your hands turn white from gripping your steering wheel a little tighter because we rolled up on you and cut you off and stuck guns in your faces, that's reasonable suspicion to then detain you. In other words, we start things, and after we start them, we can claim that you did because president of the United States is a Nazi. Hey, you know who else is a Nazi? There's Greg Bovino, dressed up in his Nazi garb, because Greg Bovino, his job is to be a Nazi. Matter of fact, he is one. And then Donald Trump found all the Nazis in the country and made sure, yo, you guys have a job with me. As long as you guys know you're around me, you can do the full dress up. Hey, you know what he probably wanted before this was to make sure that they all dressed up like some, Confederate soldiers who wanted to, make sure that their enslavement practices continued on in this country. They still have Civil War reenactments, or the folks who lost, they win instead. Those losers, they have cosplay of their fantasies of winning something because they're too weak to actually win something. I'm gonna show you one more picture of this guy, Greg Bovino, who says, if you grip your steering wheel a bit tighter, the SS will come and we'll say that you're a little too scared and therefore you're guilty. Like I said, these are the Nazis, these are the terrorists, these are the traitors to the United States of America. They know it, but they figure we've got the guns in your faces already. You kind of have to just go along with that. Here's another ICE agent explaining their approach and how they actually go after American citizens, while at the same time saying that they don't go after American citizens. They should probably get their talking points right, but really they don't care because they don't have to make any sense.
The temporary arrest or detainment of U.S. citizens, or examples of U.S. citizens being questioned about their papers and the fact that they are here in the country legally or illegally. Why is that happening? And can you explain in what circumstance that would actually occur, that a U.S. citizen would be questioned about their American citizenship?
If that U.S. citizen is perhaps with our targeted illegal alien that we're looking for, and we're going to identify that individual, and we're not, if we have to make sure that the individual is somebody that we're not looking for, one, and two, that they're not illegally present in the United States. And it happens in every police action in the United States, no matter what. You're going to identify the person that is with the people that you are looking for. So if I ask you if you're a United States citizen, if you have some proof of that, so be it.
But you are not deliberately targeting American citizens.
No, of course not. I'm not going to arrest an American
because
citizen.
That is an accusation that some of the protesters would make.
Right, and they're wrong. We don't target United States citizens. ICRO does not target United States citizens. If they get in our way or interfere with one of our missions to make that arrest, I will arrest you, though.
We don't target American citizens, but if I roll up on an American citizen, demand his papers, that's not me targeting an American citizen. Which one is it, bro? Because again, these guys, not that they don't know what the law is, they don't care what the law is. They've rewritten the law to say it's my duty to walk up on anybody, the reasonable suspicion of white knuckles grabbing a steering wheel, you looking afraid when a gun is pointed in your face, and be like, well, is that an American citizen with you? Because you look a little bit scared after I just threatened to kill you. But for some reason, when they look scared, when someone shows up with a cell phone, that's not reasonable suspicion to their criminal activity. Did you notice that part? So obviously these guys are dumb, but that's the thing. They get to be dumb. The dumbest, most fearful, violent, savage people are the ones that are in charge right now. And that's how they're operating. They do whatever the hell they want because the guy that they're led by does whatever the hell he wants. And there's not enough people willing to push back on that actionably. A lot of people are saying things and we're beginning to get some of that pushback, but that's what they eventually expect because they know people are going to be fed up. People have no other choices. And that's when they want to then kick in their next stages of their authoritarian rule. But I want to give some details about what this guy just said about how they're not targeting American citizens. Just like when Donald Trump said that the job numbers are great, and then that is until job numbers showed him that they weren't great, they start manipulating things to try and make their reality become ours. This is what's going down in Florida when it comes to American citizens and them sweeping up in these ICE raids. Florida officials have been accused of quietly scrubbing records showing U.S. citizens were swept up in the Trump administration's immigration dragnet after a local paper started asking some questions. It's weird. They like to change things and reality, even records, kind of like they've done with everything else. Here's more details from the Daily Beast. Of course, the state of Florida, led by Governor Ron DeSantis, has collaborated closely with the administration to carry out Donald Trump's mass deportation push. Earlier this month, Florida launched this online dashboard tracking arrests of suspected undocumented immigrants. So the Miami New Times reports that on October 14th, the dashboard showed that 21 U.S. citizens had been arrested and charged since August 1st. The dashboard then reportedly counted another 9 U.S. citizens who had encounters with law enforcement but were not arrested. So we're counting up to 30 now of U.S. citizens that have been illegally caught up in this dragnet of arrests and detainment by this Gestapo that says they don't target American citizens, which was also said by all those folks with Trump derangement syndrome that said they're going to target American citizens because they're traitors. Yet, the New Times reports that when it inquired about U.S. citizens, why U.S. citizens were being arrested in the immigration sweeps, the numbers suddenly began to change. The dashboard's, quote, demographics tab now shows that 2 U.S. citizens were arrested on local or state charges since August 1st. No encounters with U.S. citizens that did not result in arrests appear in those records. An October 10th Tampa Bay Times article previously reported that the dashboard showed at least 24 encounters with U.S. citizens. So we've gone to like 20 to 24 encounters, arrests, and detainments of U.S. citizens that they had on their dashboard of illegals. And then when people started looking into it and asking them, yo, you have American citizens that you've been snatching up, after saying that you don't snatch up American citizens, and they got to scrubbing it. Because Ron DeSantis is another dog to Donald Trump, who he rests his crusty toes on. Lastly, according to the New Times' October 15th report, neither the Florida State Board of Immigration Enforcement, DeSantis' office, nor the Florida Department of Law Enforcement responded to a request for an explanation for these shifting figures. So after you get busted, after you get exposed for the things that you're doing, and you get scrubbing them, and then you get asked what's going on here, they just zip it. All agencies be quiet. I just talked earlier about how the White House punted on some information they're supposed to be given about their illegal activities, punted it to the Pentagon or someone, also punted it over to the Treasury, and nobody has any answers. It's a circular firing squad of shut the fuck up. Kind of like how criminals act. Here's a moment from Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. He's one of the folks that's pushing and fighting against all of this stuff, these detainments, these illegal activities. But have we been hearing lately about what's going on in these facilities? You know, places like Alligator, Alcatraz, which is supposed to be shut down. There was folks being detained in a basement of a building in San Diego where a couple of California representatives showed up and were denied. This is Representative Krishnamurthy talking about what it is that happens there with American citizens. Who knows? They're scrubbing details. So it could be anybody with these human rights violations.
Well, it turns out that ICE isn't just disregarding the law outside the facility, but apparently inside the Broadview facility as well. Here's an email I received from a constituent who was detained at the Broadview facility. It said, and I'm just going to quote one part. My dad was sent to Mexico, but he told me he signed his voluntary leave because the conditions were so inhumane inside the Broadview facility. I talked to him last night, Pastor Black. He said that there were up to 60 people kept in one cell, and he was forced to sleep standing up. Now, Pastor Black, coercing people to give up their rights isn't just illegal, it's morally wrong, right?
That is absolutely correct.
And members of Congress are being denied our rights as well. I went to Broadview on 2 occasions and demanded entry into the Broadview facility to conduct oversight and pursue legislation regarding this issue, as is my right under Section 527 of the DHS appropriations law. But ICE has turned me away. Now, Mr. Fee, this is blatantly illegal, correct?
Absolutely within your rights. Excuse me. You're absolutely within your rights to get into that facility. Yes.
The law is the law, Mr. Fee, and it needs to be followed. President Trump needs to respect not only First Amendment rights of protesters, not only must respect the right of human dignity, but he can't stop shielding himself from transparency from Congress.
Human rights violations. I posted over on my Instagram, over on stories over the weekend of pregnant women that had miscarriages, were mistreated from this party of human life and the unborn, the the innocence of the unborn. They don't care. They don't care. Nothing they've ever said is based in any kind of reality. So we've got human rights violations going on with American citizens and folks that were here undocumented, but they just don't care. They assume the American people are like, yes, we're bloodthirsty. We hate these people. That is until those American people that said they're all on board with this find themselves in those places, in those detainment camps turned concentration camps. I mean, are we expecting them to make an announcement that they're Hitler? That this guy is his spirit animal is Adolf Hitler, and that Stephen Miller is Joseph Goebbels, and that they're carrying out the exact same things. I'm gonna probably do it tomorrow. I'm gonna see if I can expand the story more, but there needs to be more discussions about this tearing down of the entire East Wing of the White House, this Trump arc, and the connections that it has to Nazi Germany. And again, their spirit animals, the Nazis. It's the exact same thing. So once people are fed up, they're ready for that, and that's what they want. That's why they attacked this country. I got 22 minutes left. I'm gonna squeeze in this last story because I'm coming over to TDR next. If you guys enjoy what we're doing, if you haven't seen a lot of this information or seen it presented this way, keep coming back. We do it every day at noon, I promise. And also, if you can't get here at noon, we do put these up later. So if you missed anything, it's going to be back up over on the watch list channel. I'm seeing you guys are starting to get a little bit of a speed and some more views happening there. And I appreciate that because I think everyone needs to know what's happening. So we talked about all these other things that are going on in the world. What about what's going on with our trade policies and the destruction of our economy as the president continues to lie about how great it is and wonderful things are going? That is right before he goes to destroy more things. Did you guys hear about this little dust up with Canada? I talked about it last week. I'm going to revisit some aspects of it, but it's directly connected to Ronald Reagan back in 1987. Donald Trump is mad about reality being pitched from another country. So this is
Just moments ago, President Trump said he's going to be imposing an additional 10% tariffs on Canada. This comes on top of the existing tariffs on Canada, including on steel, aluminum, and cars. President Trump is still furious at the country. This comes just days after President Trump announced that he's ending all trade talks with Canada, angry over an ad from Ontario province that uses audio from former President Ronald Reagan, where he slams tariffs for causing job losses and raising prices. President Trump accusing Canada of trying to influence the Supreme Court, which soon is going to hear arguments about whether President Trump's sweeping tariffs are constitutional. Now, we've heard from the White House that President Trump is going to be meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, in Asia this week.
Donald Trump is trying to impose a 10% additional tariff on Canada because of because of him lying about this ad that was put out by the province of Ontario about what Ronald Reagan said about the effect of tariffs. Because as Donald Trump has always said, the use of tariffs is to punish people for saying things that are truthful that I disagree with because it doesn't fit my dishonest agenda. How does that have anything to do with the financial greatness of this country, the golden era that we've been ushered into? What do tariffs have to do with him and his anger towards another province in another country to talk about what Ronald Reagan said? Who knows? Actually, who cares? This old piece of shit keeps going down this same propaganda rabbit hole.
I don't know. They cheated on a commercial. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs, and they said he didn't. And I guess it was AI or something. They cheated badly. Canada got caught cheating on a commercial. Can you believe it? Yeah. I don't know. They cheated.
I'm just curious. Was the very next question from those folks, Mr. Dumbass, did you say AI? Did you say that they used AI to manipulate what Ronald Reagan actually said about tariffs. Did you say they used AI? That is after the Reagan Institute, whatever the hell it is that he leaned on. It's probably run by folks that are MAGA, that said Ronald Reagan never said that. Here, watch the full 5.5 minutes. And then if you watch that full 5.5 minutes, you hear that Ronald Reagan said exactly what it is that that ad said that he said. I'm wondering when somebody's going to ask him, are you sure about that? Because what you're saying doesn't make any sense. He went on Air Force One. He kept talking about it there too. That is when he didn't want to talk about it more. But this is his anger towards, Canada. What a loser this guy is.
This is an ad. That was an ad run by a provincial government in Canada. Why you mad with the federal government?
Because whether it's provincial or Canada itself, they all knew exactly what the ad was. The Prime Minister knew. Everybody knew. The Prime Minister knew what the ad was before it went.
Will you see him in APEC? Do you want to meet with him?
I don't want to meet with him. No, I'm not going to be meeting with him for a while. No, I'm very happy with the deal we have right now with Canada. We're going to let it ride.
Well, we have Secretary Benson here. Can you ask about the Fed search as well? Where are you? This is an ad. That was an ad.
This guy's literally using terms like he's in a casino, rolling some dice at a roulette table. He said, I'm happy with our deal right now with Canada, which there is none. I'm going to let it ride. That's what he said. He said, I'm going to let it ride. The Prime Minister knew about it. I don't care that it was just done by the province of Ontario. I don't care. They all knew. Based off of what? Hey, Mr. Dumbass, how did you know that everyone is involved in this? Number one. And number two, who cares? It was the truth. He keeps trying to shift the responsibility and also the point of this whole thing. He's wrong on it, but apparently it was just, AI. Hey, so for the sake of you guys maybe didn't see it before, here's that very real based and factually based reality ad that the province of Ontario ran that he's so mad about, that he's imposing more tariffs. That is he?
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Because that was AI. Everyone that follows this guy and listens to what he says knows that doesn't make any sense. They just need any kind of excuse. It can be as thin and flimsy as that one to look at that ad and say, oh, it's totally AI. But then, he's flying around in a fighter jet, dropping shit on the United States of America and his own AI ads. And that's just the president, according to Mike Johnson, using social media in ways that not many other people can. No lie. This guy's like raging on this whole thing. And the reason he's raging on it is because he's trying to overdo the reality and the truth with his propaganda. I'm going to show you more of what it is that he was saying. He's so mad.
Ontario said he's going to pull that Reagan tariff ad from this Monday, but he's airing it during his first two World Series games.
Well, it's a crooked ad. I heard he's airing it. Canada, that's why I pulled everything. Canada, they did a crooked ad. They knew it was Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. What they did is really dishonest. And I heard they were pulling the ad. I didn't know they were putting it on a little bit more. They could have pulled it tonight.
They're going to pull it Monday.
Well, that's dirty playing. But I can play dirtier than they can,
It's on the Australian.
Really very dishonest.
Mr. President, you called the president of Colombia. I brought
Can you imagine if any other president, we usually just include the former Democratic presidents and go straight to Obama because they hated him for wearing a tan suit and using mustard on a hot dog or something like that. Can you imagine any president saying, I'm going to play dirtier than they will, based off of something that was based in reality? how soon they'd be raked over the coals. But this guy walks around and looks at the media organization and says, I'm going to play dirtier than them. I'm a criminal. I'm going to do dirty things. But you know what? I listened closely to this next time when he was on Air Force One talking about his petulance and his anger towards truth and reality. And listen to listen closely and see if he's talking about when this 10% tariff will kick in, or if this is just him flailing like a little baby again.
Social about the Canada tariffs. Can you walk through when you expect those to take effect? And can I ask why?
We're gonna let them know. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. He used them sparingly, which he probably would make a mistake. He made a mistake in that. And again, I was the biggest fan of Ronald Reagan, but on finance, on trade, it wasn't his strong suit. But he liked tariffs, and they totally changed that to say that he didn't, because they're catering to the Supreme Court, because Canada's been ripping us off for a long time, and they're not going to rip us off anymore. Canada has been ripping us off for a long time. One of the most difficult countries to deal with has been Canada. As much as I love Canada itself and the people of Canada, they've just had a lot of bad representatives. They did a fake ad yesterday. They were caught. The Ronald Reagan Foundation was the one that caught him, and it was totally the opposite of what they said. So I don't like that. That's dirty pool, and you can't do that. And let me just tell you, they shouldn't have done it. And they've apologized, and they said, we're going to take the ad down. Well, they did it, but they did it very late. They let it play for another 2 nights, and now they took that ad down. So I don't know when it's going to kick in. We'll see, but I don't really want to discuss it. Let's go.
Mr. President, can I just add?
The question was, when is that extra 10% tariff going to kick in on Canada over this ad? And he talked about anything else. I'm sorry. He talked about his propaganda pitch and the 5 different stages of it that he could. They cheated on the ad. It must have been some kind of AI. They've been screwing us over for years on this, and I'm finally doing something about it. They've taken it down, but did a dirty pool on it. Like, he went through so many other things that have nothing to do with the question of, so when is this going to kick in? And he probably saw the look on the reporter's face. That's what he said. And let me tell you, I'm still going through my levels of propaganda on this, because he was going to come back and ask him, so like I said, when is this 10% additional tariff going to kick in on Canada? Because you just like to say things. He's looking to threaten because he's upset, and he thinks somehow this Canadian ad that's based in reality is going to influence his Supreme Court, who's already vowed loyalty to him, that they're going to rule against his ability to slap tariffs on anybody at any time for any reason, like he's doing right here, that's destroying the economy, So that's what he's afraid of. And he thinks, well, let me push a hardcore propaganda push when I actually have no idea or plans of how I'm going to pull this off. Let me just say things. And if anybody asks me, I have to go back down my list of propaganda topics to go through. So I'm going to run this again. I want you guys to remember what he said. There was AI. Remember what was said in that Ontario ad that he's so mad about. It's only 2 minutes long, but it's the pertinent portion of that moment from 1987 when Ronald Reagan was talking about tariffs.
For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports.
If you guys know any MAGA folks who are buying the bullshit, just play that for them. Run it for them every time. Run it every time Donald Trump says something else. I want to show you something else because this is what's happening from a soybean farmer. This is from a month or two ago. A soybean farmer talking to Representative Mark Alford, his representative, and who's a huge Trump backer and kisses his ass any chance that he gets. Listening to what Ronald Reagan just said in reality of 1987 that Donald Trump said was AI and actually doesn't exist, as he laid out exactly what tariffs do to businesses, employees, jobs, and the economy, that protectionism that he was talking about. Look at someone who's dealing with it in real time.
I realize, as regarding tariffs, people are on both sides of the fence on this. However, I mean, the tariffs did have an effect on this, regardless of whether you support them or not. You know, Brazil is now China's top exporter of soybeans, or they import soybeans. And our pork exports to China have dropped like 35% or something like this. Okay, and you talked about the importance of agriculture. In all honesty, these markets are never coming back. You're right. You know, they were one of our top customers. You talked about being in business. You don't kick out your top customer. So how do you, what do you tell farmers in your district that, guys, these markets aren't coming back? And yeah, we can import or export a little something to Mozambique or someplace like that, but they're not going to make up what we've lost to China. So what do you tell the farmers who are losing their farms, or, you know, we have low prices because there's no market for them? What do you say to them, or what is the answer, or whatever?
That's a very good question. What I tell farmers is we don't know the outcome yet of the tariff negotiations with China. That is the big elephant in the room.
Mark Alford kisses Donald Trump's ass, gets very close to his anus, and he has no answer for his constituent that said, what's your answer to this? That's the big elephant in the room. We have no idea. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm waiting for my dear leader to tell me what I'm supposed to do and say next. That's his answer. He got run out of multiple town halls before because Mark Alford is a puppet. He just is. So lastly, I got to get out of here in a second, but I want to bring this full circle. The threats are coming towards Canada over this ad. Donald Trump said he's not going to talk to the prime minister anymore as they all go off overseas for these meetings and talks. So all that is set up. And as was pointed out before, we're losing this particular guy, that soybean farmer, and many others, and many other industries are losing business, and also raising prices and going out of business based off of these policies. I'm going to show you guys what the Prime Minister of Canada is talking about when it comes to potentially talking with us, and pay attention to how they're moving on.
All right, good morning. Look, for months, we have stressed the importance of distinguishing things we can control and things we can't control. We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We recognize that that policy has fundamentally changed from the policy in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. And it's a situation where the United States has tariffs against every one of their trading partners to different degrees. And it's in that context that our officials, my colleagues, have been working with their American colleagues on detailed, constructive negotiations, discussions on specific transactions, specific sectors, steel, aluminum, and energy. And a lot of progress has been made. And we stand ready to pick up on that progress and build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions, because it will be for the benefit of workers in the United States, workers in Canada, and families in both of our countries. Now, what we can control, absolutely, is how we build here at home. And that's the focus of Budget 2025, generational investment here in Canada. And what we can also control, or at least heavily influence, is developing new partnerships and opportunities, including with the economic giants of Asia, which is the focus of this trip.
New partnerships and opportunities with economic giants in Asia, which is the purpose of this trip that he's taking there. We'd like to work with the United States of America. You're being run by a fascist madman. We're trying, but he doesn't want it. So we're moving on. And as that soybean farmer and many others have said, once you lose those markets, you've lost them. I'm going to see you guys on TDR in a second. Appreciate you being here. But understand, this is where the destruction's coming from. This is where it continues to go through. And it's all based in stupid, egregious behavior. But he knows what he's doing. I mean, the people that are running the government over his fascist ass know what they're doing. I'll see you guys a second on TDR. They're probably freaking out. See you later, Ma.